The Spanish Constitution envisages a part of the country wishing to gain its independence. It outlines the steps to be taken. Two-thirds of the Spanish Congress and Senate must first vote in favor. A general election is then held. Afterwards, again two-thirds of Congress and the Senate must vote their approval, and finally a national referendum is held in which all Spaniards are allowed to vote as the issue affects them too. This is not what happened in Catalonia. It was a unilateral declaration which ignored the supreme law, the Constitution. That is why there are politicians in jail. Michael Nicholas, Spain. You know what I love about this column? The music, obviously. The regulars. The idiots and the fun that can be had. But what I really love, and it happens more often than you think, is that we can go round in circles on a subject and then up pops Michael from Spain to explain the country's constitution. Meaning the next time you find yourself in a conversation about Pep Guardiola and his yellow ribbons, you're better informed. Stick with 5 points, kids. Even when it's not much fun, it's educational. Plus it's always got the best tunes. Point 1, about bandwagons, witch hunts, and all the other stuff getting in the way of what is simply a matter of right and wrong. And where were all the journalists who suspected or knew something was up? Personally, I, without any medical training, realized that medication for asthma will have a dramatic effect on lung power, and my curiosity was raised. But why, oh why, don't the journalists ever scream about the wrongdoers early doors? It's always after the event, but in the meantime they play along, feigning shock and traveling the word. I mean the 99%, not Matt Lawton, who was on this from the start. Bite of Common, United Kingdom. So apart from the brilliant Matt Lawton, who has been rightly winning awards for his investigative journalism for the last 4 years, David Walsh, who brought down Lance Armstrong, the Sunday Times, who helped expose the corruption at the IAAF and in Russia, the outstanding Danny Taylor and his work on the abuse scandal in football, and the many reporters who have chipped away at corruption within FIFA, UEFA, the IOC, and organizations from bobsleigh to gymnastics, motivating investigations that have led to arrests and regime change. What have the press ever done for us? You were curious, eh? Well done. What revelations? Asthma medicine improves lung capacity. Startling. If you send your address, I'm sure Matt will parcel his awards up and send them over. You deserve it. British cycling has been enormously successful, but of course it won't be now because of the constant witch hunts. You'll soon have what you desire. Great Britain nowhere on cycling, and you'll be wondering why. Dirk, Sevenoaks. No, I won't give a stuff, Dirk. Didn't change my life when we weren't good at cycling, didn't change my life when we were. As someone whose job is to report on sporting excellence, however, I do wish to believe completely in the people and teams I write about. So I approve when cheating or unethical behavior is exposed. If Britain's performance level drops spectacularly now the spotlight is on them, it says something, don't you think? Or do you just choose not to think if it's raining medals? This really does feel like a witch hunt by the media and someone wanting to make a name for themselves in Parliament. Interestingly, no charges are made, just muck thrown around and people expected to remember something from years ago. Tigers Fox, Leicester. I didn't know the press could charge anyone, or even a parliamentary committee for that matter. As for memory, the protagonists seem to know exactly what they took and why, right up until the mention of those two little words. Jiffy bag. And then they're racking their brains. You don't think that's odd, no? No failed test, no case. Rules is rules. Who's next? Mo Farah, Kelly Holmes, Sebco? The Daily Mail just loves killing British success. GRW, London. Lance Armstrong never failed a test, you do know that, yes? Neither did Marion Jones. If there is a subject you know something about, maybe try posting on that instead. Absolutely typical Samuel article. Waits for the bandwagon to roll, then jumps on it like an excited cheerleader, while also taking a pop at the entire sport of cycling and enlightening us as to why Iberia will never produce a Tour de France winner, which was my favorite part. What a privilege to be able to read the wise man's poisonous musings. Steve Tinch, London. I've been writing about this since the first allegations surfaced. Steve, you just haven't been reading. Your prerogative, but you'd know a bit more about the subject if you did. Decoding your rather torturous metaphor, I feel the cheerleaders are those, like yourself, who plainly see no possible wrong with British cycling because the sport comes wrapped in a Union Jack and bearing medals. And the point about Liberia was to explain the challenge presented by the wide global participation in football, compared to the relatively niche confines of cycling. Maybe if you found a part of the column you actually understood, that could be your favorite extract instead. Sorry, what a pointless article. Cycling has zillions of followers. Team Sky and Sir Bradley Wiggins have done nothing illegal. They worked within the rules and produced incredible results, but a bunch of arrogant, thick MPs have been manipulated by hackers and other malcontents to undermine our achievements. Really, we are quite pathetic. You only have to look at the behavior of so many of our politicians trying to undermine Brexit and you can see the loss in national pride and respect. COPE 46, Glasgow. Firstly, if an athlete uses a 2A without medical necessity but to enhance performance, something certainly is wrong. It's called cheating and is no cause for pride or respect. The MPs called all of the principal players in for examination and gave them the opportunity to plug some sizable holes in their stories. It is not the fault of the committee that they could not. The British public do not have to feel grateful for achievements that cannot be trusted, just as they do not have to get behind a bunch of clowns who have had close to 2 years to formulate a plan for Brexit and have so far come up with nothing remotely credible, beyond chuckle-headed soundbites and cake-and-eat-it fantasies that are never going to fly. Nobody has to be proud of their country, its athletes, politicians, or intellectuals for the sake of it. Great, brilliant. So why has it taken a decade or more for you to say what at least 50% of the population have known all along, unless you're just jumping on the latest bandwagon, of course? Toastrian, Bradford. You know what happened at Team Sky, do you? Try writing it. See how you get on. We've got the toughest libel laws in the Western world here. You can't just say what you suspect, or think you know. The parliamentary committee was able to go further than newspapers could, but even now lawyers still pour through every sentence on this subject. This week, lines have been removed from my copy that our legal advisors thought veered into dangerous territory, and the Daily Mail's legal department is not as cautious as some. All columnists, all investigative reporters, every journalist in fact, is familiar with legal complications. I have heard my editor singing the praises of Matt Lawton for his forensic knowledge under questioning from our lawyers, so it isn't as simple as shouting the odds in the corner of a saloon. You need evidence, affidavits, witnesses, inside knowledge. In my head, I have 3 names of British Olympic gold medalists whose results make me suspicious, but could I make those thoughts public? Hell, no. Not without proof. So congratulations to the 50% of the population you think we're well ahead of us over here, but in our position, having to print this in black and white, they wouldn't even be out of the starting blocks. Point 2, on equivalency. Why have none of the MPs on this committee had the guts or decency to comment publicly on this matter, rather than hide anonymously behind parliamentary privilege? Therein lies the biggest stench. Dave Stockport. No, the biggest stench is all the stuff Team Sky can't adequately explain. And the names of the committee are on the report. That is their public statement, surely? Since when are a group of British MPs the experts on deciding the rules of an international sport? Did any of the cyclists overclaim their expenses? Wirral Freeman. Anyone who regularly reads the column will know I am extremely skeptical when politicians meddle in sport. Too often I find them more interested in grandstanding, career advancement and easy headlines. I felt much the same way about Damian Collins and his Media and Sport Committee. It seemed to me that all they ever did was follow up investigations in the newspapers, in an attempt to hijack the glory. Credit where it is due, though. This report is excellent. It is powerfully written and takes the subjects on, with new evidence. My colleague Matt Lawton is impressed with it, and that's good enough for me. The expenses scandal has absolutely nothing to do with it and does not prevent parliamentarians from doing their jobs. If all they had uncovered at Team Sky was an expenses fiddle, British cycling wouldn't be in the crisis it is now. They got much, much more. All us cycling fans who have been watching for years knew what was going on. You Brits ruined the sport. The tour has been going for a long, long time and is special. It might be niche for you, but not for millions of Belgians, Germans, Dutch, French, Spaniards or Colombians. If you want to ruin a sport, go and ruin rugby or cricket. Fully informed, Bouvet Island. So which of those countries are you really from? You're not from Bouvet Island, because it's uninhabited and sub-Antarctic and belongs to Norway. Still, thanks for giving me the best laugh of the week with the idea that Britain ruined the noble, clean sport of cycling. Athletes from all of the countries you mention are well represented in cycling's Hall of Shame. This explains why, in Britain, it always was a niche sport, because we all thought it was bent and not worth our time. For this reason, the only way Team Sky could persuade us to take interest was to present themselves as different, and above cycling's tawdry past. This is the cycling you so love, and it was tarnished beyond repair. Few here cared about it for that reason. Britain ruined cycling? There was nothing credible left to ruin. And now, almost as if planned, a meeting of Anglo-pop genius, Eurotrash sensibility, and Norway's remix master. Good to have the raging hypocrisy of the Brits exposed. After the pontificating against and demonizing of Russian athletes, we find your crowning sporting achievements are also soiled. Our government's behavior and doping program was disgraceful, but you are no better. Next time a doping scandal emerges from another country, best you remain very, very quiet. The Yakutian Yodeler, Russia. Why should we remain quiet? Odd statement. Only cowards or fellow cheats turn their backs and remain silent. It's better to strongly criticize the wrongdoers wherever they come from, including your own country, as this article does, and as did the parliamentary review on which it is based. All countries have their cheats, liars and criminals. It's what you attempt to do about them that counts. Hopefully more yet will be done here and internationally. Dave H., London. Spot on, Dave. And what has Russia done about its cheats? Denied, lied, dissembled, hacked, deflected. They're a disgrace. Far from keeping quiet, we should get louder. The determination to expose cheating, even if it has occurred in our backyard, should embolden us to maintain the pressure on some lying Russian weasels. They apparently sent their cleanest athletes to Pyeongchang and still came back with the most positive tests. Is Britain better than that? Who isn't? The world, and British sport, is not perfect, but most countries are certainly better than Russia at addressing corruption within sport. Over here, Matt Lawton wins awards. In Russia he would have gone the way of that poor sod in Salisbury. With all this controversy over 2As, wouldn't it be simpler just to change the rules to state that if because of illness you need banned doses or substances to compete, you have to either continue at less than full fitness or sit this one out? Although tough for those affected, in practice it would be no harsher than any other injury, and it would reduce this gray area where nobody really knows what is cheating and what isn't. Hrvatski, Taiwan. Agreed, except with that last point. Everyone, deep down, knows what is cheating and what isn't. Everyone. Point 3. It's been 20 years, I think we can tell this one now. I seem to remember Glenn Hoddle's England players were given injections and didn't know what they were for. AAA, London. Supplements, 2. England players before the 1998 World Cup had these big bags of supplements and most didn't have a clue what was in them. They just took them because they were told they would help performance. It was Gary Neville who was given the injections, and Sir Alex Ferguson became convinced they were behind his slow start to the 1998-99 season. I was at a Sunday newspaper briefing when Ferguson told us how worried a lot of the managers were about what Hoddle had been giving the players. There was never any question that he was doping, more that the clubs didn't know what was being introduced to the system, and some coaches vehemently opposed the use of a supplement such as creatine. Ferguson said that one manager had actually complained to the Football Association. Anyway, later that day one of his people phoned around to say all the best stuff he had told us was off the record. Much of it couldn't have been printed for legal reasons anyway. There was some scurrilous stuff about another club manager he also suspected, but it seemed a shame to lose the line about the complaint to the FA. Being resourceful, however, there was another way to land the story. So, on behalf of those present, one of us rang the FA and asked for their reaction to a story that a manager had complained about the supplements. That person may have also left the impression that we had all the details. And back they came with a response, confirming it all, denying there was a problem, and even providing the name of the manager who made the complaint, which Ferguson had stopped short of telling us. His identity? Alex Ferguson. You've got to admit, he played that one beautifully. He knew we would get the story, which he wanted out there, but that couldn't come directly from him. So he planted the seed and let us do the rest. It always made me laugh when people said Sir Alex hated the press. He was a very smart man in some of his dealings with us. Point 4, VAR. To people who say we should share VAR with the supporters in the stadium, what if the venue does not have a big screen? How far down the leagues would we take VAR? And if not all the way down, are we claiming League 1 and 2 matches are not important enough to warrant it, if this truly is an essential system? Breadsticks, London. I think manpower becomes an issue eventually. The sheer number of VAR officials needed on a Saturday afternoon if the system is rolled out across 4 divisions. We would have to let ex-officials, not just current ones, pick up some of VAR's slack lower down. And while nobody is saying Leagues 1 and 2 are unimportant, they are clearly distinct from the Premier League. Not all forms of professional tennis have the technology available at the majors, for instance, and cricket varies competition to competition, too. As for keeping fans informed, that depends on how this is done. If they have to see what the VAR official sees, then a big screen is essential, and for financial reasons we may have to limit its use to the Premier League, or at best the top 2 divisions. If the onus falls to the match official to keep the fans informed, as happens in the NFL, with a microphone linked to the stadium, then it can encompass all 92 clubs, as safety dictates all stadiums must have an adequate tannoy system. It could be simply enforced, either way. Provision for a big screen could be part of the deal for all clubs in the top two divisions, so, if you want to come up, then these are the conditions. Regulations like that are already commonplace, ensuring all-seater stadia in the Premier League, and turf pitches from Tier 4 upwards. Tottenham vs Rochdale was a bitterly cold evening and the players, as well as the fans, were standing around waiting for VAR decisions. It's just not good enough. As I understand it, every goal will now be checked. Is this correct? It seems ridiculous. Surely it should only be used if the referee calls for it, or the fourth official sees something the referee has obviously missed. There still should be the majority of trust with the match official. Bagsy B., Luxembourg. I agree, Bagsy. The idea that every goal is checked for fault seems particularly negative and harmful. What a great goal. That could well be the goal of the season. And now let's go over to Charlie in an aircraft hangar in Hounslow, to see if he can find a way of ruling it out. That has always been one of my objections to VAR. It disallows many more than it adds. If you are falsely flagged offside 25 yards out with only the goalkeeper to beat, VAR has no way of recreating that situation and correcting the error. But if Ricky Villa has just dribbled past half the Manchester City team and scored the goal of his life at Wembley, then play has properly stopped, so let's see if we can find a reason to disallow it and take the moment away from him. It should be a request for assistance on a borderline ruling, or a clear and obvious mistake, not an opportunist net thrown over every moment of glory in the game. It's very simple, either scrap VAR or let the fans see the replays on which the referee is making the decision. Look at cricket, even if it takes 2 minutes to scrutinize a replay, the fans are always watching what the umpire is considering and therefore feel part of that decision. That's what we need in football. Big nose Bird, Manchester. In other words, Bird, common sense. It'll never catch on. As you know, Martin, referees in American football are hooked up to the stadium audio. They routinely explain the reason for a review and the justification for ratifying, or reversing, the call on the field. Might a similar system demystify VAR? Nylon Spur New York. Indeed it would, nylon. But see previous answer. So many people were talking about VAR before this season and were saying how it would help referees make correct decisions. Now that it has been introduced, people can't even wait for a full season before asking to stop using technology. The officials have made a mockery of it so far, but if used correctly it will help them make the right decisions and lift their burden. Instead of studying how other sports use this technology and learning to use it properly, football is acting like a monkey with a stick. Honeybee 135, London. Completely with you, honey. Unlike goal line technology, which I did support, I was never a big champion of VAR. I thought too many of the instances used to support its introduction, the Thierry Henry handball for France against the Republic of Ireland is one example, were perfect storms when every box that would enable its use could be ticked. I foresaw issues over restart procedure and failures in timing and efficiency, so didn't have high expectations. As a result, I am not as outraged by events this season as a lot of people who were advocates with big hopes for this revolution. I feel VAR needs tweaking, not abandoning, and with a more measured approach could be made to work in time for next season. It certainly hasn't been a disaster, it's just not the panacea many misguidedly expected. Point 5. Revamping the FA Cup. Sir, you once argued that to grant the FA Cup winners a Champions League spot would risk England's 4 guaranteed places. Now that that risk has been removed, would you consider it a novel way of attempting to inject fresh magic into the cup by introducing such a reward? Otis Redding, Belfast. Still a no from me, I'm afraid, Otis. For a start, England's 4 places are conditional, not permanent, and would soon revert to 3 if standards were not maintained, but that is not the only reason for my opposition. If you look at the teams that win the FA Cup, for every Wigan or Portsmouth, there are many more members of the elite, meaning it would become a cheap and easy way for an underachieving big club to knock a more deserving rival out of qualifying for the major European competition. Take last season. The FA Cup winners were Arsenal, Liverpool were in 4th place. Are you suggesting it would have been better for English football to have the sorry Arsenal team in the Champions League, and not Liverpool? Would they really deserve it more? And would Liverpool have been able to attract Mohamed Salah in the summer, without the promise of the Champions League? I have discussed ways of improving the FA Cup in previous columns, but cheapening the achievement of a 38-game season is no solution. And that's your lot. It's farewell from me, and it's farewell from Otis. And hello from another Otis. Until next time.